Today is Monday, July 11, 2022. This is the executive committee meeting at 5:30 p.m. Do I have a call to order? Mr.
Okay, Mr. Manor, I'm going to announce this evening that Mr. Pridnoff is taking our minutes tonight, so
Okay.
please have at the roll call.
Mr. Fisher.
Here.
Mr. Knipp.
Here.
Mr. Marks.
Here.
Mr. Simile. Mr. Van Horn.
Here.
Motion to excuse Mr. Stelly.
Second. He did contact me last week.
Yep.
To let me know, so we're good.
All members are present except for Mr. Simile.
Sorry, I need to turn the volume down. Okay, time to set the agenda. I know we've got some discussion tonight. There was no new business, but there's a couple things floating that I thought we'd address tonight. The first thing is the next items on the pending business were the pods, dumpsters, and the next one being the landlord and tenant. So I've had some discussion with a few people regarding both of those. So I suggested we bring those up to new business or whatever be something we're gonna handle tonight, and begin that. So would you like to do, what I wanted to ask first was, do we want to do the property maintenance first? Or the landlord tenant legislation first and the pods second? Or do we want to do it in the order that it's on the agenda?
I would prefer we do it in the order it's on the agenda.
Okay, so.
You have old business, parking issues, and pods, and then you have pending business. So are we following the agenda or something else?
Well, you need to pass your agenda. So you can address it as it is here.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, then let's set it as it is. It's fine. Sorry about that. I thought we had to move the stuff up.
Motion to accept the agenda.
Can I have a motion to add new business to the agenda to discuss salary of the mayor? Onto the agenda.
Is that something this committee decides?
I didn't catch that.
Salary of mayors and council? That's
That's not this committee. That would be the finance
What I
committee.
was told is that this committee has to put it on and then pass it over to finance and then come back to me, full council. That's the start always by executive.
So if you wish to bring something that details in finance to that committee, you can always talk to the committee chair to put it on the agenda. But that wouldn't be the purview of the executive committee.
Okay.
So do we have a second?
Second for the agenda? I'll second it.
Okay.
Gave her the second, so. Okay,
All in favor? Or you don't need to?
Yeah.
All in favor?
And the chair should do that.
all in favor? Say
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. Okay, we don't have anybody registered to speak tonight. I trust everybody's reviewed the minutes. Are there any changes or do we accept them as they were? I reviewed them, I didn't find anything.
I don't have anything.
Motion to accept the minutes.
Great.
All in favor, say aye.
I did try to watch them online. I guess we had a power outage or something. Did the minutes get
Oh, yeah.
It was just a
Yes.
flicker.
It was a flicker and then all of a sudden it was gone.
Yeah, that was a storm.
Yeah, it was up at Boston.
Yeah, the rain was so loud.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess the next thing would be, Ron, we have something about the parking issues. I know we're gonna talk to, I guess Circus Cincinnati.
So there's a number of solutions that are being put in place to deal with the parking issue across the street. The first of which, I think it was the Thursday after the last council meeting, Mr. Putoff and I had a meeting with Mr. Williker. Surprisingly enough, when we got here that morning, the vehicles were gone. And he had made arrangements to keep the vehicles for his businesses other places here in the village. So that kind of took care of itself. What we've watched though is the parking lot is filling up again. And we're not sure exactly why that is. We think maybe maybe some of the employees of the circus have decided to go back to parking there. But what we're going to put in place is no handicap parking in 2 spots near the front gate. The signs are here actually. So it's just a matter of getting the maintenance department to paint the spots and then to post the signs. And then 2 spots down from each of the handicap places, there will be signs put up that say municipal and park visitor parking only. So we're reserving 6 spots to start with to see what that does. And then we will continue to expand that depending on what happens with the amount of people that end up parking there. What we've noticed is and I don't know if the police department has had any additional input on this, but it seems we've not received any complaints since the trucks are on about parking at the park. Fortunately, there's been no vandalism in the park. And I don't know if that's by virtue of the fact that you can see the park now without all the vehicles sitting there, or it's just luck. But hopefully putting those kinds of things in place will take care of the parking issue that we're having there. Our intent is to leave the 3 spots that are at the southern end for residential parking, which the circus had done that several years ago, pretty much to accommodate the people who are just in the direct vicinity of the municipal building. But hopefully those are taking care of that issue. The other good news, as I mentioned, is that there seems to have been no vandalism in the park. Of course, it's also been a very busy time for the park. We had 3 major events in the last 30 days there. So it's nice to see that no one has painted any more graffiti over there. But the building itself has been completely repainted. As most of you have seen, it also now has a anti-graffiti coating on it, which should make it easier to clean if that ever happens again. We're also continuing with the project of trying to remove the large rocks that have been in place for drainage over there to get those out of the way so people aren't using those as weapons against the building.
Well,
So
I have a question. Are there issues with people parking over there all night or anything like that?
There's vehicles that I think stay there depending on, my opinion, my belief is if there's employees that are sent out of town for certain bookings, that cars might stay over there.
But not Gulf Manor employees, but other people. Should we just, I realize this might be a headache, but a lot of places, you go to like French Park or something, it says park closed after dark.
I think our challenge is those parking spaces are right on the road.
Yeah.
It's, if it was a lot, we can control it, but with them being right on the road, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
We've had people park vehicles there for safekeeping too.
Yep.
If they knew they were going out of town and they couldn't leave the car, they want to leave a car on the road, they would bring it and park it there.
Yeah. Okay.
Until they got back.
It's just a question. I realize it would be hassle to enforce. But yes.
So Sergeant Reed has ordered no overnight parking signs that we're going to use in tandem
Oh, okay.
with the,
Yeah, that's exactly what you were asking. I think that if signs, even if you can't enforce it, make a big difference. People see that and they know that it's
it's clairvoyance. Let's see, I'm trying to see if I have those or not.
They're up in the office, I could bring them in between meetings.
Oh, okay.
Good luck with that.
We can do this for show and tell for the main council meeting.
You're so accommodating. Real quick note, Ron, on the concession stand with the paint, I noticed that they used like a real like gloss type finish until you kind of get up to the top, then it's like a flat. So there's a little, I don't know if that was on purpose, it didn't look on purpose.
That was by design.
Okay, because it'll still be susceptible up there.
But the whole thing has been treated with anti-graffiti coating. So it should have been on the top too.
Just so you know.
I would touch base with Mr. Putoff.
You can't see areas like there where it's a different sheet.
Yeah, so it's like it's flat at the top and it's glossy at the
You
bottom.
could tell the empty
Oh,
graffiti.
yeah, it's very obvious.
I just didn't know if you knew about it or not, so I bring it up.
My understanding is that the entire building is graffiti proof
Okay,
or graffiti resistant, I should say.
Appear to be the case, but I could be wrong.
okay, well, we can ask.
Okay. anything
That's
else?
it for that.
Okay,
Real quick, where are we at with cameras for that?
Thanks for everybody's work on cleaning up those spots.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Thanks for all your work in freeing up those
Oh.
spots.
You're welcome. I should mention, since we're talking about the park, we had that big rainstorm, was it last Thursday or Friday?
Mhm.
We did not see an excessive amount of water appear underneath the playground where the swings are.
Mhm.
So those are all blocked right now. So we're trying to see whether or not that was an underground water source. So apparently it actually was the water table. We'll probably be taking that fencing down within the next week, so those swings will be open again, so kids can play. But again, that is something we're going to need to try and find a solution for, is how to deal with drainage on that side of the park, because that continues to be a problem.
So we had enough, or a few rainstorms continually that raised the table temperature.
well,
We
you
have
had
one-
9 inches of rain in May
Yeah,
alone,
yeah. that's
so.
a lot.
Well, and
Probably
it's
saturated.
I gather when you is it at Fairhurst where that puddle on Lucinaville keeps appearing? It's the same situation. That is not a broken water main, it's drain off of
That's it, really.
the hill. Same thing is happening, I believe, in the park. So we really need to take a look at putting some type of a French drain system across that area.
That would work, wouldn't it? French drain,
You know,
this is not easy work, but it's.
Is there anything that relates with WeHe to the park? Or when we do the road, is there some kind of, if they look at the drainage over to the park or something like that?
Well, you have curves on it, you know.
Yeah, I wasn't sure though, if there was something there that's,
so what I'm encouraging what do they call it? The Community Engagement Committee to do is to get their park committee together. The mayor has charged them with putting together a park committee. And the park committee should be there to help us make a decision about how we're going to use the park, what kind of amenities need to be in the park, what kind of improvements need to be made, also pushing us in a direction to be able to have some type of unified approach to applying for grants. I believe that at some point in time, we're going to need to build that wall across the front. But again, that's going to take engineering and going to take money to be able to do that. But before we do that, let's have an idea about where things are going to be placed in the park.
yeah, I just wasn't sure if there was an engineering thing that could be looked at from a civil.
Yeah.
Perspective. See if
Most
they,
engineering
use
firms should
this
be able to
problem.
come out and kind of look. And-
I just didn't know. I mean, you're right.
I think it should be like an engineering survey to kind of see, and this is for a short-term fix, to kind of see what's going on in the park, and then how much, to your question, is WeHe sidewalks and parking lot contributing to that? Is it spilling over? And is the original design for it, looks like it's supposed to catch everything at the bottom of the hill, is it actually taking it where it's supposed to take? And was the grading done properly when they installed the original topography for the park? And I don't know that would cost a whole heck of a lot, but companies like Bear Becker or something like that, I've seen them look at stuff like that in the past to see how they can engineer that. Because that might be there might be, 1 5-foot area that's raised too high that could cause all this problem. And maybe we don't need to do a French drain, but maybe we do. Maybe that one little squiggle spot that carries that water right there, put a little drain there, take it underground to where it's actually supposed to drain, which is by the water fountain. So it's probably worth having an engineering company at least take a look at it. I don't think it would be a whole heck of a lot of money unless they have to, spend a day out there, mapping everything, but I don't know that they have to do that. But that would once we have that information, then we can look at, what's the business district gonna look like, what's the park needs and wants gonna look like, and then we can, I don't want to spend a lot of money early on kind of fixing that, when really we're gonna tear the wall out altogether in the future or rebuild something. As we start getting that master plan together, it'll be interesting to look at that.
And I agree with you that needs to be done, but our focus is the strategic plan.
Right.
And doing that right now is a distraction from getting the strategic plan done.
And I agree.
So-
That's what I'm saying. I don't know if strategic plan is 5 years out, then maybe we do need to do Band-Aid, which is an engineer out there, move some dirt, make it work the way it was intended. If it's, a year out, then it's a different story. Don't spend money on Band-Aids.
She's looking for somebody.
I was specific, I thought we had engineered or being engineered now?
We have a road engineer,
Okay.
but we would have to hire somebody, and that's not something that we're expensed to do at this point. And our focus is the strategic plan.
Okay.
So it's gone off the board right now, but that's what we need to get done this year.
And I agree. I'm saying, nobody's spending $1,000 for a Band-Aid fix if we really are a year out from implementing a strategic plan.
We're not.
Even to.
We're real close.
Well, my impression is that when they design roads and even sidewalks, they definitely include water and rainfall as part of their engineering to civilly figure out.
Right, that's how they fixed Elbrook.
Right, and that's why I'm saying if they're doing a weehee, it's not really, it is about the park sort of, but is there something about weehee and
It's
way to
a
build
draining
that's
into the
contributing
park.
to it, is all I was asking. So I think that could be included in at least raising the question to the engineer to, keep that in their scope, so just look at that.
But there are storm drains on Weed.
Say what now?
There are storm drains on Weed. There are no, it's not like Englewood where there's no storm drains.
I don't know if there's storm drains or not.
On Weed,
Yeah. The
Englewood has nothing.
the only storm drain that I'm aware of that the county actually ever did was the one that runs down Canterbury Piper.
Hmm.
So
Okay,
Okay? All right, so. Okay, so the next thing would be odds and dumpsters.
do we have any sample legislation from Mr. Donlin for this? Because that's how this usually starts.
Yeah, we got something.
that would be if you go back and look at the previous meetings it's in.
I look back about 4 or 5 months and I didn't see any.
It's out there.
Yeah, it was,
So can we get that?
February we got,
Huh?
beginning of February.
February, okay, I was on a different committee, so. Yeah, so is that when it was on the minutes, or where was it?
I don't think it was put on the agenda, it was just sent to party because.
it was a while ago.
Well, he thought it was February, so how do we get that sent to everybody that's currently on the
I can make
committee?
sure
Okay,
it gets revisited.
because that's the way we should start, is if Mr. Donlin sends something, that's usually the framework. And then he usually, did he let everybody know that here's a framework, this is what
He
several other
sent us
places
to
have
Columbia
done?
Township or different townships,
Maybe Montgomery.
Montgomery Township, and he said, this is what they wrote, look it over and see if you guys want to do anything with that. That was basically what it said.
So what that legislation, I reviewed it back then, and it was basically covering dumpsters, pods, containers, and porta potties. I believe. So I talked to Jim Putoff today and asked him, what are your thoughts? If you're not gonna be, what are your thoughts? And he basically said, Raj, he goes, his biggest concern is the dumpsters. He said those right now of the 4 things are the most. He said they do get put on streets and potentially damaged. He said they can be odor producers, depending on what's in them. They collect people's trash that if they're sitting there too long.
Right.
And he said because we had one that he said there was one in Elbrook, I forget what the street, I think it was that was out there for like 4 months, and he said I had no ability to have that one, have it moved. He said I'm fine with dumpsters, they're doing a roof, they can come, be here for a week or two, and, you know, but he said I need just something to help push those along, if, you know.
As well as pods, we can't have people put pods in their driveways and wherever else and just sitting there.
Yeah,
Sorry, that's a,
Yeah, but he said that the pods are, well, in a hierarchy, when talking to Jim, he said that if you guys could address that first, I was kind of saying, let's have an approach, because each one of those things is different, how they get used, where they get put, and all those other things. So I suggested we just start with dumpsters, and then build on it, do one piece at a time.
well, this one here covers all of it.
So back in February, Mr. Donelon had given us this to take a look at. This relates to regulations for temporary storage containers, basically stating that they are used by property owners within the vicinity to provide temporary storage. The administration has recommended that the city adopt regulations, which is what we're doing. Planning Commission has studied the proposed regulations for such units and has recommended specific regulations to be adopted by council. Council has held a public hearing, which we'll need to do as we get ready to pass this. And they are saying, probably skip down here, any container, storage unit, or other portable structure designed primarily to be used for the temporary storage of personal property which is located outside an enclosed building. Accessory buildings complying with all building and zoning requirements shall now be considered a temporary storage container. So a built garage sitting on a foundation would not be a temporary storage container.
Right.
Hand crayon. Section 2, whatever this ordinance is, shall be amended to add the following categories and restriction. Temporary storage units are recognized as a permitted structure, building or use. Such as units are permitted in the front, side, and rear yard. Such units shall meet the front lot setbacks consistent with whatever our ordinance is, and such units shall be set back from the side or rear lot line by 5 feet or more. Further amendment to add the following: temporary storage containers may be used as temporary accessory when in use, complying with the following standards. May be located as a temporary accessory use on the property within the city for a period not exceeding 30 days. That's where we have the issue. They're appearing and they don't go away.
Correct.
And essentially they become an accessory structure at that point. The owner of the property in which the temporary storage container is located or the agent shall obtain a permit at no cost from the zoning administrator no later than the first day such container is placed on site. That's the other problem we have, is they appear and nobody tells us that they're here. Most recently, there was one that popped up on Canterbury at the corner of Hamel, and it was there for like 2 weeks, kind of obstructing traffic.
Yep.
And I thought there was a house where the resident is deceased. I thought they were cleaning that house up, but it turned out it was the opposite corner. And there really was no adjacency, it seemed, between where the pod was and where it was being used. So I think that needs to be in our ordinance. It needs to be on a paved surface. So this can't just be plopped in somebody's backyard. If it is on a paved surface.
Somebody's side yard than on the street, because if it damages the street, that's an expense.
Well, the issue with the street, and this is something that's not in an ordinance, but we've always recommended. When people drop dumpsters or pods, that they put plywood under them so they don't damage the asphalt. No more than one container. The container may not exceed 8 feet 6 inches, and it's whatever the standard is. Temporary storage container should be located a minimum of 10 feet from the right-of-way line and a minimum of 5 feet from side or rear property lines. So the one sitting on Canterbury certainly did not meet that.
That was one of the revisions that I submitted, is that is almost impossible in Gulf Manor where the houses are close, so I have to make it like 2 feet.
So a temporary storage container shall be secured in a manner that does not endanger the safety of persons or property. Further, standards for temporary storage container may be varied on a case-by-case basis. So what our goal here is to make it easy for people to be able to use these when they are necessary, but they are not a replacement. That if you have more stuff in your house than what your house can contain, it's not a replacement for buying a storage unit somewhere.
Right.
I would recommend that since this does involve planning commission codes that they are enforcing, I think this committee could make recommendations to things that we would like to see in this, and then send it on to the planning commission for debate, and then have it come back to you guys. And fortunately, Mr. Simile is out this evening, but our vice chair of planning commission is here.
Magic.
Any thoughts on that?
I did talk to,
Yeah,
oh, I'm sorry.
I'm happy to put it on the agenda for planning commission. I don't think that's gonna be an issue.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is an urgent one that we need to have a meeting for. If maybe tag it on if we have other hearings or something like that.
So there is a
Christmas
meeting
off
scheduled for August
for
1st.
A year. Okay.
Okay.
To put off this-
So
for this
I think what we
year.
could do is Mr. Van Harn or somebody from this committee could address the planning commission on August 1st and make a request based on this information that Mr. Dolan has provided, and then provide feedback to the committee to devise something.
I'd be willing to do that.
and,
Unless somebody else wants to.
and Jim said he'd be willing to, be in a meeting too.
He's on
He
planning
just couldn't
commission.
hear tonight.
He's on plan.
Oh, he is,
Yeah.
okay,
So,
all right. He didn't know it switched to plan. Oh, excuse me, yes,
This is the question is probably at this point going to be most appropriate to planning commission when they're hearing this subject matter. But within the context of the current legislation that's there, and it's saying 30-day limit and individual variance, no fee, but individual variance, will be heard on a case-to-case basis. The one that I have most of a personal interest in has to do when you've received your zoning permit and your building permit, and construction's gonna last 6 months, all right? And you have the pod, my personal plans are I have the pod on my personal property behind the privacy fence, right? I wanna make sure that I'm not getting tagged as mayor or any resident, get tagged in that kind of situation.
Yeah, Jim and I talked about that. He said the big thing is get them off the streets.
Yeah.
And on driveways, like if they're right in front or something like that. He said beyond that, he says, I'm not.
But they need to be temporary.
I think my opinion is for our purposes, we don't want them on the streets because parking is a premium. The streets are too narrow to accommodate these. If someone wants to plop one of these in their backyard and kill their grass, I don't care. It's their grass. I think the issue is the amount of time that it sits on the property. So I think there needs to be a regulation of 30 days or whatever makes sense. And then with most of these things, we have an appeal process. That first point of appeal is to the administrator to make an extension. And if they don't like that, whatever that decision is, then they can take it to the planning commission to appeal it. And and on an appeal like that, there's no charge for the planning commission. So that can all be built into it. I'm sorry.
I'm just not sure how this works, that I have a private backyard, I can do what I want in my private backyard. Why are we making ordinances for people not to be able to do stuff in their own backyard?
Okay, and I'm so sorry.
You know,
It goes loud enough for you.
Yeah.
I said, this is people's private property. What are we making ordinances for people's private property? Let them do what they want in their backyard. I'm saying,
I think it's a balance between.
I think we have.
And resale values and stuff like that.
So if you have a neighbor who complains because you've had a pod in your backyard for 6 months, I think that's a different matter versus maybe you needed one for 30 days because you're doing a house project and then it turns into 45 days and maybe it turns into 2 months. I think those kinds of things could be accommodated.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that if I have a problem with what my neighbor is doing, I'll go speak to my neighbor and explain to him how it's making an issue for the whole community as it's bringing our property values down. Talk to him like a human being. He'll go ahead and get rid of it. He's not gonna keep it here. Why, by us, do we have to come and put in ordinances? We're gonna come down with the big guns and say, you take this off or we're blowing your head off.
That's a little extreme.
I understand that.
But something happens, by the way.
What I'm trying to say is that if people have problems with someone else having a container in their property, go talk to them as a human being, and usually they'll fix the issue up. Same thing as if it's on the road and it's having an issue, go ahead, the neighbors that don't like it, speak to your neighbors, speak to your fellow friend, and tell them to get rid of it, and let's work together and get rid of it. People need help, we'll lend you a hand, we'll help you out, and we'll get it out of here. What are we coming from government and just going ahead and saying, okay, you know what, we decided that everybody's not allowed to have in the backyard a swing set. You know what I'm saying, like, why are we putting in this ordinance? I don't understand the whole ordinance.
This is not about swing sets and things like that. This is, we are, because I walk around a lot, okay? I mean, a lot. We have a very big problem with junkyards, junk cars, people with containers and things sitting around open. And it's not getting smaller, it's getting larger.
I think the purpose of the ordinance is for the people that don't respond to that conversation.
Yes.
I could think of many examples in the village where people have tried to talk about a problem and it's almost escalated into a physical dispute. So that ordinance is there as a safety net for these issues that the residents won't work with one another for. I don't think we want to make it overly restrictive.
No.
It gives us a tool at this point that when somebody is stubborn and refuses to do something about an issue, then we at least have a guideline that we can say, this is where this is going. Our preference in any of these cases is not to fine, not to be combative with people. Livable community is what I always think
Certainly
of.
not blow their head off.
But the
I appreciate your passion.
and it's a good point of view. I'm thinking we should recruit you for the police department. Because honestly,
we all know with today's days on bringing up our kids and all that, it doesn't work old school of giving them a bunch of restrictions. It doesn't work. The nicer you are and the more you work with them, the more they work with you and the more they go. It's the same thing with human beings. As soon as you come with an attack to them, they try to attack you back. And when you're government and you're stronger than them, they can't attack you back. But they end up being very upset and they'll go around and do other stuff and stuff like that. When we can work with them and work with them in a nice way and get them to do the things in a nice way, I don't see a reason why people won't do it. It's common sense. If you're blocking someone's view and people can't park and everybody has right to the parking, you have a container sitting there for a month. It's common sense to move it. Saying, I'm gonna trust the, chief over here that people don't do that,
But if they disagree with you and say, no, I think 120 days is reasonable, then where do you go?
Nowhere.
And I agree with
No,
you.
I'm saying-
I want to see
I'll
less
tell
and
you
less
another
bureaucracy and rules from the government
I'll tell you another point, right?
until you have
I have a better idea.
a
Instead of
problem.
me getting a pod, I'm gonna rent a truck. And I'll park it outside my house and no one can tell me what to do. So I found a way around the ordinance. So we're gonna put out an ordinance, no trucks. We're gonna put out an ordinance,
We have
any
that
old
ordinance.
cars.
We have,
It's a measure of freedoms, your freedom ends where somebody else's begins and vice versa. So if I'm raising goats and they stink to high heaven in my backyard, at some point you have a right not to live next to goats, or whatever it is, or bees, or we got chickens now. That's actually allowed in the ordinance. I get exactly what you're saying. I'm probably on your side more than anybody, but I think to the chief's point, there are people who do it and maybe they'll put this in their yard and they're tearing their roof off, they're remodeling the house, but then all of a sudden they have a financial issue and they can't do anything, or they choose, I'm gonna do this, and this, and I'm just gonna leave it there forever. And at some point, there's gotta be, in all civilized circumstances, there's always a boundary. Everybody's boundaries are a little bit different, and codifying something in ordinance helps, I think, to a degree. But at the same time, I don't want somebody to come in and regulate us like they do in Marymount. You can't do this with your house, this with your house, this with your house. And my father was of the same thing. He had 5 acres, And he loved it. He goes, I bought this land because I don't want anybody to tell me what I can do with my land. And we would talk about that. He says, I don't understand how people can live in communities with HOAs, homeowners associations. And I sell real estate, so I'm like, I understand why they're there. I don't necessarily want to live in a community like that because it's too restrictive. But at the same time, the very next time I came out, my dad was complaining that they had 6 cars up on blocks in the house next to him, and he's just complaining about the rats and the smell and all this. And I said, well, Dad, if they had an HOA, that probably wouldn't be an issue. And he didn't like that. So it's a measure of freedom. I mean, none of us are free. The question is, how many laws do we want to have in place to restrict ourselves to be cognizant of other people's rights and needs? And I don't think this one goes. I think the idea of looking at this is smart, because you do have people in the neighborhood who are just like, that's out there, and until somebody makes me move it, I'm not moving it. And that's unfortunate, but and I think, you know, people like Jim Putoff is in a position where now he has the code where he can approach them in a nice way and say, hey, look, you know, this is in violation, you know, this is going to attract rats and it's going to do this, you know, we'd really like you to, you know, abide by the code.
Yeah.
And then if they don't, then it's, you know, here's your first warning, here's your second warning, whatever we decided to do with it. Then it's like, hey, you got to move it.
So up until 2016, we hired a third-party building code enforcement company. Prior to that, we had our own code enforcement official. NIC out of Dayton was a bargain for us because we only paid like $1,500 a month to have them come do our building code stuff. The issue, though, was they made lists and lists and lists and lists of all the problems in the village, but we did not pay for the service for them to go out and actually talk to residents and say, these are issues, you have to do this, this is what could happen if this doesn't get taken care of, to actually work with people. And that, to me, is part of our success at this point. Is we ended that in 2016, put Officer Matthews out there, who actually took the time. Many times she held people's hands. I think Chief Campbell can attest to that, to get people to comply to things. Jim is very good and very aware of that. He's also very aware. I think Mr. Pridnoff saw in one of the meetings that we had earlier last week, I guess it was, where we were talking about enforcement of, what were we talking about? It was in context of the
fence questions in
Yes.
backyards.
So that's one of the things where we've had previous administrations who made a zero tolerance on a particular issue and went around and wrote letters to everybody in the village, ticked everybody off just before a tax levy. And that isn't a reason for us not to do something, but there's also the way you deliver the message and how you work with people. The fact is, we have the tool there to be able to say to people, okay, we need to be reasonable with you. We need you to take care of this. And if it's kind of like what we're dealing with the buildings down on Stover, they just refuse to do anything. No matter how many times we cite them or how much money we cost them, they just refuse. So we end up in court with those kinds of situations. Thank goodness we have the ordinances that we can enforce, or there would be people living in those buildings in squalor that would have health and safety issues because of that. So it's trying to keep a do no harm kind of approach to making sure that we have tools for our code enforcement people, for our police officers, for the administration to deal with when we have problems. And I hear what you're saying, because you don't want to feel picked on. Marymount I lived in Marymount for 10 years. That's very restrictive there. You can't sneeze and not have to make sure you check the color before you can walk away. So
What I see here is, this is what the process is gonna look like. You know, the things I see are, the closer this container or whatever it is to the street, the more we're concerned about its placement, what it does to the street damage. The farther it goes to the backyard, we're all starting to say, no, and we're gonna find that balance between those two. I think too, in talking to Jim, there are nuances to each type, whether it's a container or a pod or whatever, and how they, because pods actually are not that damaging because they have those nice lifts now that they don't just dump them off. But dumpsters, he said, dumpsters, you know, they just,
Yeah, there's one up on Canterbury now,
So-
the wood under.
yeah, so those are the nuances. And like I said, and like Ron said, is if he has this now, he can, if he sees a pod, he can now have a discussion with them and say, hey, what's going on? This is our thing, got 2 weeks, get a free permit. It opens the discussion. He said, now I can't even really do that. So I think there is a balance here, and that's what the process is gonna.
Well, it sounds like anything we put together, we can set the level of communication and how it escalates.
Yeah.
So I think,
Almost.
because I think you're right, usually it's just a conversation of, hey buddy, you realize that's been there 3 months. Oh, I didn't really realize, yeah, it's kind of, tracking, vermin. Anything you can do about it. But there's also those neighbors who really don't want to say anything because they feel bad. And I think it is incumbent upon us to be the bad guy a little bit more.
Okay, so we're gonna.
To a degree.
Louis volunteered to be,
Small
I
government.
guess, as a subcommittee to kind of put something together.
So
Yeah.
let's,
Or
I can just,
can I place some context around this?
Yeah.
So we need to prepare for an August 1st planning commission meeting. Someone from this committee should appear in front of the planning commission making this request. So we need to figure out who's going to do that. We don't have to figure it out right now. But what I'd like to do prior to that is to have a conversation to put together our wish list
Okay.
of things to be discussed. And then
with planning
hopefully,
commission,
I'm sorry,
with planning commission,
with planning commission. And then hopefully the planning commission will have some kind of discussion and context to it on August 1st. And then Mr. Donald would have something back to this committee, probably September, whatever that date is, September 12th, I think. Is that workable for everybody?
I'm good with that process.
So who wants to work on those with me?
I can.
I can, or two of us can,
Yeah.
whatever.
So why don't the three of us will schedule a meeting in the next week or so to sit down and talk about those.
Okay.
Mr. Pridenoff has put that in the minutes and
Who were the three? It was.
be gentle.
Not me, these two, us two, Roger and Lou.
Van Horn, Marks and Hearth.
Can we do that after the?
Sounds like a law firm.
It does.
It does.
Can we do that maybe after the meeting next week for the 75th?
Possibly. I think there's something else going on that day. I'll take a look.
Well, you want to throw out some dates and then Roger can look at his calendar.
Yeah, next week should be better.
That would be like Thursday at noon.
I know where you come from, and I don't disagree.
No, that's a 9:00 meeting, isn't it?
Yes,
You know what I mean?
that's Thursday Thursday at 9.
It's easy to make
So-
them all.
You
It's rare that it gets
and
rescinded.
Mr. Marks, Mr. Van Horn will work to compile a list
So you end up
of
with a big
the wish
stack.
list for the planning commission.
Yes.
And it's kind of a wish list from the executive committee.
It's like
No,
fences.
yeah,
kind
correct, just,
Make
it's
it
only
so-
movement.
You don't have fences and your dog poops in somebody else's yard. They don't
So-
tell your neighbors.
Danny, one of you guys would be welcome to sit down at a meeting or just contact me or Lou if there's anything you want to make sure. This is
So,
our committee's wish list.
You
that
gotta watch how many elected people.
so
Right.
we can't
Yeah,
have a quorum of this committee at that meeting, so it really just should be Mr. Marks and Mr.
No,
Van
he's
Horn.
saying he's not on something we could call.
Oh, this committee, right.
Yeah.
I was thinking council.
No, we could call them and then tell them what.
You can, yes, you can have individual
Sorry, I was thinking
conversations.
council.
So can you resend that to everybody? 'Cause
Sure.
I was gonna attach that to the minutes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's actually a link that we can just,
You have to-
Okay.
put it out there.
You want to, okay, that's fine.
I think those are from Montgomery.
Yeah, that's what it says.
Oh,
on
it
the
says
top,
Montgomery.
Montgomery ordinance.
He only showed us a temporary, it's something that we should, just to wrap our heads around it, and then he said, he'll rewrite something for us based on what we want.
Right.
That's what he sent that.
Yeah, there was definitely reason in there.
Yeah, so if we have a discussion with planning commission, planning commission can put their input on it, and then we can come
Yeah.
back with
Well,
Mr. Donald.
And I'll be honest with you, I see more similarities with portable restrooms and dumpsters in this than not.
Oh, yeah,
So
Sure.
this might be the ordinance to deal with all
I
that.
think it is.
Did we ever
But I
have-
think-
Did we ever have an issue with portable, restrooms?
Mm-hmm.
We did.
They appear
They came right there.
and then never disappear.
They appear out of nowhere.
On a private property?
On the street.
On a
Well,
street?
the other thing too is as we have vendors in the village doing work and they bring those with them, so like the Vera Road project, well, yeah, you have portable restroom on 2 of them on your street throughout the
They
whole
moved
road
it as
project.
they were going along.
Yeah,
Yeah, they were pretty-
Every week it moved. You knew
Yeah,
they were pretty on top of
You
that.
knew that the job was getting clean every week. It moved, physically
Mhm.
moved to where they were up to.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the same thing. They were pretty on top of it.
okay.
I was talking about if we ever had where they were set for months, that's what I was asking.
Okay, so there really isn't anything motioned or voted with that process to do this now, so.
Yeah, I don't think we need to vote.
I don't think there's a motion needed.
Schedule another meeting.
Schedule another meeting. What the hell, another meeting?
Now here's your bureaucracy.
Yeah. So Ron, are you giving us an approximate meeting time or not?
Well, if that meeting is at 9, why don't we say 10:30 or 11, something like that?
11, next
What's
Thursday?
Because that meeting tends to run over 9
Yes.
o'clock.
Yeah, and that one probably will because we have a lot to finish up for the 75th.
Might let Jim know too. Said he'd be willing to.
Yeah.
What is he?
Well, if he knows there's something on this, he'll be there.
Yeah.
Okay, so Thursday, the 21st at 11?
Sounds like a winner.
Okay.
Yeah, it's open for me too. Okay. Do we want to open discussion on landlord tenant?
Yeah, so this is something that's been on our wish list for a while, and we're kind of waiting. I think the mayor has been in touch with this. This is something that we've been notified through the Hamilton County Municipal League. But there is discussion at the state legislature about our ability to control rental properties. They're batting it around. In fact, what good timing Mr. Donald's here.
We've been talking about it.
That being the case, I struggle with whether or not we should spend a lot of time right now on whether or not to try and create guidelines for landlord-tenant communications without knowing what the state is going to do. And I don't know if Mr. Don, I hate to put you on the spot, but I know that the legislature is talking about taking any control that we have as a chartered community away from, is it Airbnbs?
It's any type of rental regulation, and it's getting a lot of layup there. They're in recess right now, which is good, because they don't think our lives will go for the next couple of weeks. But it's expected when they get back after the November election, that is gonna be one of the top priorities, that and the tax issue. So I think we're gonna have to sit down on the sidelines, bear with them, and tell us what we can and can't do. They'll also probably wind up in litigation, because it tramples on home rule. But it would make no sense for us to push it right now and then have this come right back at us.
So the issue becomes, at this point, I think we should put our efforts on getting our strategic plan in place, getting things like pods where we can see fairly immediate results to take care of some of the problems that we have. My wish would be, and we'll talk about this when we get to the Finance Committee meeting this evening. We are making a recommendation to change our salary ranges. We're doing an update and a refresh based on the economy, doing what the economy's been doing. In addition to that, I have put in the budget for next year, the addition of a public works manager that would replace Andy's, the side of Andy's job where he supervised the maintenance department. That being the case, I would see property maintenance enforcement falling into that area. And at some point in time, I'd like us to be in a position where we would have somebody who's full-time, who's available to work on property maintenance, and then also have a part-time person who just does that. Now, given the state of the economy, I think the other thing that we need to do right now is to be careful, as you'll see in our budget proposal we're doing, because I think we need to prepare for the eventuality of a recession. And we in 2008 were not prepared for that, which is one of the reasons we went into a $200,000 deficit in 2013, 2014. So I think our eyes are wide open. We want to be cautious going forward. But on the other hand, I think how we accomplish some of the things that we're trying to do to improve the village requires also an investment in people. We've invested in stuff the last couple of years. Thank you, COVID and ARPA funding. But now I think it's time for us to take a really hard look at how we're paying people and do we have enough adequate capacity to be able to do the kinds of things that we want to do. So the landlord-tenant issue, I think, also goes hand in hand with a program that we used to have that when we switched to NIC, we ended, where the village would certify when you put a house up for sale whether or not it met all of the building codes of the village. In fact, when we moved here in 2003, we were handed a certificate that our property passed. I think it's a program that's worth some merit, particularly when you look at some of the problems that are out there. So it's a big issue. So I think at this point in time, my recommendation would be to leave these under pending business and see what the state legislature is going to do, and then also get some of these other items cleared off of our list.
Makes sense to me.
Good.
Any discussion? All right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
You made the motion to adjourn?
I asked for one. So you,
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
I would.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
The first Monday, the first Monday of the month.
Oh, what's now, finance or?
Okay, we're still live.
I just saved this file.
Right.
And we're clear.